Thanks for coming out, Mike. I appreciate that there's still politicians in the federal government that are interested in coming to Atlantic Canada and talking to Atlantic Canadians for a change. My question is actually directly aimed at this topic, and I have made some startling observations. I study economics here at Dell. My name's Colin, by the way. I've noticed that the population of Atlantic Canada is becoming stagnant. The GDP of Atlantic Canada has been far outpaced by the rest of Canada before this recession, and this has been a trend that has lasted over 20 years. I was wondering what your government, if you were to form a government, sort of your party would do, where the Harper government has failed to do, for Atlantic Canadians and making sure that Atlantic Canada can grow and have as positive a future as what you're advocating for the country itself.
Thank you, Colin. Well, I wouldn't talk about a culture of defeat. That's a good start. I mean, that was a terrible remark by the Prime Minister. What I see in Atlantic Canada, and my great-grandfather was born here. I mean, I have Atlantic Canadian blood in my veins, is a culture of endurance, a culture of perseverance, a culture of innovation, and a culture with a strong conviction of what could be called social solidarity. This is not a place where people, fall through the cracks. People look after each other in Atlantic Canada. These are terrific values to build on. So I start from the premise that let's work on the strengths, and the strengths are enormous. And the biggest strength is right in this room. It's post-secondary education in Atlantic Canada. As I think Sharon said as she introduced, Atlantic Canada is, and I think Dalhousie is the best example of this, attracts more students from out of province and from the rest of Canada than most other post-secondary education institutions in the country. Well, we got to stop thinking of universities and colleges. I was at Nova Scotia Community College this morning as just education institutions. They are economic drivers for the whole region. If you've got strong post-secondary education, that is a key to pulling population in and holding population. The other strength you've got is a strong public sector. It means that Halifax has had a tough time in recession, but a less tough time than many other parts of the country. So there are strengths to build on. But again, when you look at other strengths in the Atlantic economy, like oceans, like fishing, there you see the link between post-secondary education and economic sector. The way to get the future of the ocean economy in Nova Scotia will not be fish, it'll be biotechnology coming out of the ocean. I don't know anything about this stuff, but I'm convinced that the future of the Atlantic economy is in someone's microscope, a Dow, right now. And so that's where we have to invest. And that's where the federal role is so crucial. The federal government has the driving role in research investment in this country. So the straight answer to the question, what do we do to help the Atlantic economy, is bet the store on things like oceanographic research in Atlantic Canada. Bet the store on investment in these institutions because these are growth pools for the whole regional economy. Thanks for the question.
Hi. The Liberal Party has passed progressive climate change resolutions. For example, those passed in Vancouver last May, outlining science-based emissions reductions targets of 25 to 40% below 1990 levels by 2020. Yet your Liberals delayed Bill C-311, the Climate Change Accountability Act, and you personally have not signed the Kyoto Plus petition. Despite the urgent nature of this bill, why did so many of your MPs vote to delay C-311?
Our caucus was very sympathetic to the overall objectives of C-311, but I'm a legislator, so I have to vote on the bill that's in front of me. And we thought C-311 was flawed, and I could go on at length about why it was flawed. it gave the federal government power over the provinces, which we thought was at the edge of being unconstitutional, just to give you one example. So we shared many of the objectives of 311, but we thought that the language we just couldn't vote for. I mean, I can go on at great length. But the real question you're asking me is not about C311, it's what's your environmental policy? And I think that's, we're looking at a government that over 4 years has done nothing on the environment, right? It's a kind of amazing thing. And worse, their excuse is we've got to wait for the Americans. First, when President Bush was in office, they said we can't do anything because President Bush is in office. Now they're saying we're waiting for Obama, or we're waiting for Waxman-Markey, which is the climate change bill in the Senate. What we've been saying as a party is you can't let the climate change policy of Canada be driven in the United States. We understand we live in a continental economy. We understand that if you set carbon reduction targets in Canada, they got to fit with what's happening in the States. But what's wrong is to spend, and they're going to do this if they stay in power, they're going to wait until the Americans get their act together. And we've been saying, don't wait. We can set up a cap and trade plan right now. 3 provinces are getting into cap and trade. What we need is federal leadership. We need to get absolute reduction in carbon emissions, and we need to set that market up for cap and trade right now. We can set it up and get it going. And then when the Americans come along, they catch up with us rather than we catching up with them. So that's the start. But it's only the start, because I've also talked about the need to enhance the protection of the boreal forest. That's the lung. It's one of the lungs that Canada has. We have huge amounts of boreal forest. It's as important as the rainforest in Latin America. We need to protect and enhance and increase the size of the boreal forest. We've got to do a lot of climate change mitigation in the north. And we've also got to protect sensitive marine areas on our 3 oceans. So boreal forest, sensitive marine sensitive marine areas, and 3, get a cap and trade system and stop waiting for the Americans. That's the Liberal climate change policy.
Thank you for coming to speak with us today, Mr. Ignatieff. My name is David Etherington. I'm the president of the Student Union of the University of King's College, and I'm really excited to hear you talk about investing in post-secondary institutions, because over at King's right now, we had a sewage line burst, and we have to shut the room because there's not the money to repair it. So we're closing classrooms, and we can't stack our library with books, and it's really a terrible situation. And I think that stems not just from a lack of funding from the federal government, but the fact that when the money does get to the province, a lot of the time it gets redirected, especially in Nova Scotia, to roads. In 2007, $1 million in infrastructure went to pave rural roads. And Megan Leslie, our MP, has spoken a lot about the possibility of creating a Post-Secondary Education Act, and the Canadian Federation of Students has for a long time lobbied for the creation of a Ministry of Post-Secondary Education at the federal level to deal with chronic underfunding at our post-secondary institutions, and I was wondering what you thought about these initiatives.
Thank you.